All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to Site 73, everyone. I am Dr. Damian Wolf, and I'll be your guide for today's mandatory training explainer. Now, I've got over a decade and a half of experience here at the Foundation, an IQ sitting pretty comfortably above 186, and a pretty deep background in both psychology and metaphysics. Basically, I'm the guy they call when an anomaly leaves everyone else scratching their heads. Today, we're diving into SCP-666. And look, I usually like to keep things lighthearted around here, but make absolutely no mistake, understanding the mechanics of this entity is literally a matter of life or death. The stakes really couldn't be any higher. So grab your coffee, take some solid notes, and let's make sure you actually survive your deployment here with us.
Here is the roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The metaphysical shifting yurt. 2. Memory, remorse, and hostility. 3. Simulated vices and real fatalities. 4. A case study on Subject D-140-390. 5. Containment and quarantine protocols. And finally, 6. The Wendigo Hut phenomenon.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the metaphysical shifting yurt, deceptive appearances and anomalous movement.
So what's truly fascinating to me is the sheer, boring, everyday reality of this object's appearance. SCP-666 is just a medium-sized Tibetan yurt. We're talking about 30 feet wide at the base, an 8-foot interior ceiling, and a basic dirt floor. The branches that make up the frame are wrapped in rabbit fur and tied together with yak leather thongs. I mean, to the naked eye, it looks exactly like a crude, primitive tent. But that completely masks its true metaphysical threat. You see, this structure induces severe, highly targeted, anomalous hallucinations based entirely on a subject's personal history of substance abuse and addiction.
And this brings us to a metaphysical puzzle that just absolutely fascinates me. How does a physical structure shift locations without being directly observed? Because periodically, SCP-666 will literally change its location inside its confinement area. But here's the catch. It only does this when no one is looking directly at it. If you're staring right at it, it's a tent. But the split second you look away, boom, it moves. A remote viewing feed suggests something truly bizarre is happening here. They give us the distinct impression of an entity inside the structure, literally lifting the whole thing up and carrying it to a new spot. We're dealing with a physical intelligence that operates entirely in our perceptual blind spots. It's wild.
Moving right along to Section 2, memory, remorse, and hostility. The psychological mechanics of SCP-666.
Now, this is where my background in psychology really gets a workout. If you walk into this yurt and you have absolutely no history of addiction, nothing happens. You're just standing in a tent. But if you do have a history of substance abuse, the anomaly weaponizes your own mind against you. It perfectly reconfigures your personal memories to trap you in the exact setting where your past addiction was at its absolute worst. We've had reports of subjects suddenly finding themselves in a nightclub bathroom, a 1973 Volkswagen Vanagon, some filthy alleyway, a specific Las Vegas casino, or a dingy apartment. The anomaly basically builds a perfect, inescapable mental stage, custom-tailored just for you. Quite the personalized vacation, right?
So, the real kicker here is how the entity inside the yurt, which we classify as SCP-666-1, interacts with you. It manifests as someone totally normal for whatever hallucination you're in. And then it starts this twisted game of temptation mixed with discouragement. Now, if the subject shows genuine remorse and a strong desire to quit their addiction, the entity actually adopts a really friendly tone. Astonishingly, about 94% of people who resist the temptation and show remorse come out with a near-complete psychological removal of their addictions. It's practically a cure. However, if the subject caves and indulges, the entity becomes violently hostile. It will physically assault the subject inside the hallucination and force their vice down their throat to the point of a massive extreme overdose.
Which brings us to Section 3, Simulated Vices, Real Fatalities, the Physiological Risks of Exposure. Let's talk about the real-world consequences here.
This is exactly where the metaphysical and the physiological violently crash into each other. The punishment inflicted in the hallucination isn't just some bad dream you wake up from sweating. It translates directly to your physical body. If you die in the hallucination, you die in the yurt, period. And the medical correlations are as clinically fascinating as they are completely brutal. Think about this. A simulated indulgence by an alcoholic results in literal extreme kidney or liver failure in the real world. A cocaine user will physically develop cardiac dysrhythmia. Even a subject addicted to something like video games or watching television will suffer from extreme, rapid muscle atrophy, just like you'd see from a lifetime sedentary lifestyle. If the mind believes it's happening, the body literally dies from it.
Let's look at a concrete example in Section 4, Case Study, Subject D-1439, escalation, and entity transformation. This gives us a really gritty, street-level view of how this anomaly operates.
So D14390 was a D-class subject with a severe narcotics addiction. During his specific hallucination, he found himself in a dingy apartment with a manifestation of his former enabler, a woman he knew named Chloe. When he caved and indulged in the opium she offered him, they got into an altercation, and he kicked her. While the second he did that, the entity dropped its disguise. Listen to this visceral account we got from him. He literally said, "I feel her nails digging into the sides of my neck." And they weren't nails no more, it was like big cat claws. Her teeth keep getting sharper and bigger. It brilliantly illustrates the terrifying, monstrous physical transformation SCP-6661 undergoes when it metes out its punishment.
Now, you'd think after a horrific experience like that, he'd be done, right? Well, unfortunately, D14390's addiction was just so deeply rooted, and the simulated high was so incredibly potent that he actually begged to go back in. My colleagues finally relented and approved a final test cycle, and guys, the result was instantaneous. Because he willingly walked back in there specifically to indulge, the entity showed absolutely zero mercy. D14390 began screaming a mere 3 seconds after entering the hallucinatory state. He expired from massive cardiac arrest in under 60 seconds. The physiological risk of repeated exposure, combined with that kind of sheer arrogance, is completely fatal.
Okay, let's move to Section 5, Containment and Quarantine Protocols. Keeping Site-73 safe. This is the operational core of why you're watching this explainer.
Listen up. Our containment mandates are absolute. SCP-666 is kept in a monitored, closed vault right here at Site-73 up in the Tibetan Mountains. The guards on duty are cycled out weekly, but much more importantly, every single guard undergoes mandatory, incredibly rigorous background checks. We must guarantee a 0% history of drug or alcohol addiction, none. If a guard with a hidden vulnerability were to be exposed, the entity could exploit it immediately, leading to a containment breach and a very messy fatality right here on my floor, and that is non-negotiable.
So for those of you handling D-class subjects, here is your actionable safety briefing. Step 1, you monitor any non-D-class personnel constantly. I honestly don't care what their declared medical history says, you watch them. Step 2, keep an eye out for signs of hallucinatory influence. We're talking stupor, incoherent muttering, that sort of thing. Step 3, the absolute second you see these signs, you don't ask questions. You remove them forcibly and immediately. D143090 only survived his first encounter because our guards physically dragged him out in time. If you delay that physical removal, you are guaranteeing them a fatal overdose.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6. The Wendigo Hut Phenomenon, Uncontained Anomalies, because this is where the metaphysical implications get genuinely chilling.
You see, what's truly terrifying is the recent realization that SCP-666 might not actually be a localized, singular threat. We've recently intercepted some unconfirmed but highly identical reports trickling out of the remote wilderness of northern Canada. Locals up there speak of a Wendigo hut that operates exactly like our Tibetan yurt. People seeking shelter from the harsh weather stumble into a primitive structure only to end up facing the demons of their own addictions. This strongly indicates that either there are multiple entities attached to this phenomenon, or there are additional instances of this yurt currently out there at large operating entirely outside of Foundation control.
Which leaves all of us with one very unsettling final thought. If another entity is already active and hunting out there in the Canadian wilderness, whose psychological vulnerabilities is it waiting to exploit next? Anomalies exactly like this one weaponize our deepest, darkest human flaws. They feed on our vices and they punish our indulgences with terrifying physical reality. I expect every single member of Site-73 to remain vigilant, strictly professional, and absolutely addiction-free. Dismissed.